it's not how long you live, it's how well you live.
Right.
And there are different ways to define that, but I think it's a combination of achievement and appreciation. And if you don't appreciate what you have now, nothing you ever get will make you satisfied or happy. And therefore, especially for someone like me, and I think this is true for a lot of people, I'm hardwired to be an alcoholic. Not an alcoholic, workaholic. I do have a lot of wine, but
Take two.
I'm hardwired to be a workaholic. And this, once an addict, always an addict. I know that. So I have to build in a practice, like a scheduled practice of focusing on gratitude and the things I appreciate, the things I'm happy for. It's very important. It's like a prescription that I give myself.
So if I'm watching this and I am trying to appreciate what I have, but I feel stuck, what's your message to those people?
Stuck in what way?
So I'm not happy with where I am in my career, or I have a startup and we're not achieving the success we want.
Yep.
You can look around and say, I'm grateful to have a place to live and have a great support system, family, whatever, but what if I am stuck?
Sure. I think you can have both. I think it's important to have some level of gratitude so that you can act from a calm, analytical place as opposed to a state of overwhelm, or a state of rushing, because that is when big mistakes get made. So I'd say a few things. Number one is do a gratitude list. 3 things you're grateful for. First thing when you wake up, first thing before, or last thing before you go to bed. Just as a ritual, make that part of your schedule. Then I would say scheduling 2 things, 80-20 analysis and fear setting. And I do that every 2 weeks or so. This is something I schedule for twice a month. So let's say every other Monday or every other Friday, I will do 80-20 analysis and fear setting. What that means is I will look at the 20% of activities or activities and people that are producing 80% of the results and positive emotional states that I want. Then I'll look at the 20% of activities and people that are producing 80% of the problems or negative emotional states in my life. I'll also look at the 20% of people or activities that are consuming 80% or more of my time. And based on the results of that analysis, which does not take long, do this on a piece of paper. It takes 15 to 30 minutes. I put together a to-do list and a not to-do list. And then I'll circle the 1 or 2 most important force multipliers. The things that if done properly would change everything. And the things that if not done at all would change everything else. Okay, that's the 80-20 piece of it. The fear setting piece is looking at why you haven't done the most important to do, or why you haven't stopped doing the most important not to do. Defining your fear very clearly. And it's just like goal setting. If you don't have specificity in your goal, you will not achieve it because you can't aim properly for the target. Fear is very similar. So let's say you're considering shutting down your startup. Okay, that's a big deal. It's a much bigger emotional deal than just quitting a job. Let's say someone's considering winding down their startup. All right, so you would, instead of having this ambiguous fear that prevents you from making any changes, you would take out a piece of paper, and on the left-hand side, in one column, you'd write down all of the worst things that could happen in great detail. So you could not be able to pay your mortgage, right? And then you'd have to do A, B, and C. You might lose this, that, and the other thing. Your co-founder would have to do blah, 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 whatever it is. And then in the second column, the next column, you write down all of the things you could do to minimize the likelihood of those things happening. In the third column, you would identify all the things you could do to get back to where you are now, if it happened. Right? And when you lay things out like that, you realize that most actions, whether it's doing something new or stopping something you're currently doing, have very low risk. And what I mean by risk, this is another word that's thrown around a lot, like success and happiness, that people don't stop to define. That is the origin of a lot of problems. Risk to me is the potential for an irreversible negative outcome. That's it. And there are very few things that actually fall in that category. And by doing the 80-20 analysis to choose those few most important items to either do or not do, and then doing the fear setting on a regular basis, you're able to act on the most important things. And being effective, i.e. doing the right things, choosing the things you do very carefully, is more important than being efficient, which is doing things well. So if you do a lot of things well, that doesn't automatically make them important.
I think that there are certain experiences every human being should have, even if they fail. I do think that starting a business or enterprise, even if it's a side gig that they moonlight, is worth the education. But there's a huge survivorship bias out there, meaning, so you open a Barron's, let's say, and lo and behold, you see all these mutual funds advertising. Oh my God, they've had incredible returns for 10 years straight. Well, maybe they're just the mutual funds that happen to survive by luck for 10 or 20 years. They haven't replaced the right bet. So of the 500, well, the other 490 are no longer advertising. So you're getting a false sample size. And you see that a lot with entrepreneurship. They don't talk enough about the failures. They don't talk enough about the vast majority who will fail. Is it good? I think that it's good for certain groups. It's certainly good for investors if they can play the game well. Because even if there are 1,000 shitty ideas, that might mean if more people, a higher percentage of, say, high schoolers or college students or otherwise are going into entrepreneurship, that you get an extra 5 that change the world at the end of the day. So I am a big fan of entrepreneurship, even though, much like anything else, that is perceived as high risk and therefore treated sometimes with reckless abandon, where people are throwing Hail Marys when they should be doing risk management, you're going to have a high fatality rate. Yeah. And I don't view that as a bad thing necessarily, but I do think that, and this is actually a question that Brian Johnson, who was a friend of mine, he started a company called Braintree. It was sold for, I think, $800 million cash to eBay, and
he settled.
Yeah, he settled. So he shows up in those times as well. But a question that he asked, because he's constantly flooded with various questions from entrepreneurs who want to make $800 million. They say, oh, well, what should I do this? Should I do that? What about this idea? What about that idea? And he just asks them, is it an itch or is it a burn? And he's like, if it's just a little itch, don't do it. You're going to fail. Because for the other people out there where it's a burn, they can't not do it, they're going to rip your face off.
This is actually super important. I think there's a lot of rah, like motivational speaker business advice out there that is utter horseshit. And I think one of the biggest delusions, illusions, or just hoaxes is like optimism, think big, the passion's gonna drive you, like that's how the people who are really successful are successful. That might be the story you read about in the magazines, because it makes for a fun hero's journey type of story, but the people that I've been most impressed by ask themselves all the time, what is the worst case scenario? They're budgeting for the downside. So in other words, they're not using optimism to allow them to take action. They're not just like, you know what, I'm gonna jump off the cliff and grow wings on the way down, or whatever the cliche is that you might find on like a calendar in Office Space. No, they're saying the way that I do things that other people think are high risk or other people think are risky, dangerous, whatever it might be, is because I write down the worst case scenarios, ask myself, what can I do to mitigate these things from happening? And then I ask myself, if they happen, what can I do to get back to where I am now? And I realize these like risky things are not risky at all. Right. They're totally reversible. They're just speed bumps if anything goes wrong, really, in the grand scheme of things. And so they get a lot of at-bats. Mm-hmm. They're really good at capping the downside. Branson has said this, as much as he has a lot of rah-rah stuff, like you drill down into it, it's like he's really good at deciding like, what is the most I can lose if I do X? What is the most time that I can lose if we do Y? And then making decisions based on that sort of, loss limit, if that makes sense. So that's very hard, because I've never been, I would like to say I'm a follow my passion kind of guy. I get excited about things. I want to scratch my own itch, but I think that the real toolkit is getting really good at asking, is this the condition that I so feared? What if? And once you sort of neuter the worst case scenarios
and depower them. You're like, oh yeah, this is fun. Like, this is totally fun. It's not any riskier than just like investing in watching a new TV series on Netflix. Like, maybe you get 3 episodes in, you're like, damn it, I can't believe I watched 3 hours of this crap. You choose another series. It's not the end of the world.
This is Derek's recommendation to his younger self, and really to any 20 or 30 something, but it applies to everybody, which is, in effect, you can do almost everything you want in life, but you can't do it at the same time. And if you can just dedicate yourself to one thing for even a year, and then the next thing for a year, you can do those 10 things. But if you try to do all 10 at once, you're gonna be Burden's ass. You're gonna be like, should I do this? Should I do this? Or should I focus on this? Or should I focus on this? So don't be a donkey.